What if we can positively impact society by reshaping the mindsets of young men? And while we're at it, let me ask you, what does it mean to be a man? My name is Dennis Meralda, a father, a teacher, a coach, a mentor, and a principal with over 2 decades of experience shaping the minds and characters of young men across the United States. If these questions resonate, if you're a young man looking to improve your life or a parent looking for tools to help your son become the best version of himself, the Building Men podcast was created for you. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Building Men podcast, or welcome back if you've been a long-time listener. We've been on a bit of a hiatus. The last episode that was recorded on the Building Men podcast before we got to what I'm calling now Chapter 2 was the eulogy for Anthony. So after a year and a hook off, I'm getting back into it. I really had the itch for getting back on the podcast. A lot of good things have happened in the world of Building Men. And so I was introduced to our guest right now by Matt Labrie, who was a guest on the Building Men podcast probably 2.5 years ago. And his name is John Ulsh. John is a dynamic speaker. He's a coach, an author, and what he's calling a resilience expert. And if you know the Building Men podcast, we are all about resilient people whose life exemplifies the power of turning adversity into strength. John survived a near fatal car crash that resulted in more than 45 surgeries. And now that we're talking, it might even be more than that. He might have had a surgery this morning, who knows? And in years of recovery, John discovered his purpose in helping others overcome the setbacks they experience and rebuild their lives with intention and courage. John has been featured in People Magazine, Men's Fitness, and on Good Morning America. He blends his personal journey with some practical strategies, which we'll definitely get in today, to guide individuals, organizations towards resilience, purpose, and lasting transformation. John is the author of The Upside of Down, which I read and I absolutely love. And he continues to inspire audiences around the world with tools for turning pain into power and setbacks into comebacks. John, welcome to the Building Men podcast.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm actually very honored to be here, and I'm honored to be the guest. Again, you and I have talked off. I mean, I'm the story of your brother and everything he was doing and what you guys did together. Incredible story. I'm a huge fan of what Building Men does, and so I'm super honored actually just to be here today.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate that. And likewise. Before we started recording today, you and I were talking for the last like 20 minutes or so, and it was gold. I was like, thinking I wish I would have started recording a little bit earlier, but we'll definitely add some additional episodes. I want to really get back to, that like crossroads for you, like when things really changed for you. And based on reading your book and our conversations, it really changed in an instant where everything was like taken away at once. So if you could start with just talking to us a little bit about that specific moment, and then we'll follow up with some more.
Yeah, so it was 18 years ago on December 1st. So it was a Saturday, and it was literally the Saturday right after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was late, so we were still in like the Thanksgiving, break time. So at the time, my wife at the time, my 8-year-old daughter Katie, and our 4-year-old son James, were all in the car with us, and we were at a swim meet, just a normal activity of parents, right? And of kids. Like, we had a swim meet. It was an early swim meet. It was an hour south of where we live, in a kind of rural area, and we were down early. We basically bribed our 4-year-old son James that if he came along and behaved himself, we would go get a Christmas tree after, because it was that time of year. Yeah. And so it was snowy again early for Pennsylvania to have snow, but we had a snowy morning. I only remember because I was a marathon runner at the time, and I got up that morning and ran 12 miles before we left the house at like 6:45 in the morning. So it was cold and snowy. And so we went down to the swim meet. It was over by a little bit after lunch. Again, our daughter, if anybody's got children who swim, she was 8. She was at the top of her little kid age bracket. She had won 4 blue ribbons that day. It was, we were leaving that in a, great positive. This is going to be your year to do really well. She swam an intermediate IM, so she swam 4 laps of for a little 8-year-old girl. That's a lot of swimming. And when we left the high school where the swim meet was held, it was a 55-mile undivided country road. And instead of turning left out of the school, and going the exact same way we came down and back home. We decided to turn right because there's a ski hill down the road, and we wanted to see if they were blowing snow because we were a skiing family. So instead of turning left, we turned
Hmm.
right. 15 minutes later, a car coming the other direction on a 55-mile undivided highway crossed the center line at the last second, and we went head to head. And the police estimated the impact speed at 125 miles an hour. So no skid marks on the road. So
Oh,
we went driver to driver at the last second. Nobody hit their brakes. Two objects moving in opposite directions. It's their combined speed. So, again, a little bit of physics, but to think that you hit a telephone pole at 55, that's 55. You hit another car coming the other way at 70. We were doing 55. The impact was traumatic. The other driver died. Now, here's another, interesting fact. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Now, whether he was going to survive or not from
right.
125, I mean, I was given less than a 3% chance. Take away any percent chance if you're not wearing a seatbelt. Um, he was on a cell phone.
Yep.
We only know that because he was talking to his fiance, who had a
Oh,
2-month-old little boy who was his. And so she heard it. Um,
oh,
so, this year was the 18th anniversary of the car accident. Every year I think about the fact that there's this now young man, 18-year-old, your audience, who grew up his entire life with not knowing his dad because his dad died when he was 2 months old. Um, my wife was injured with unconscious, shattered ribs, broken hand, broken foot. My son, the 4-year-old, was sitting in a booster seat behind me. Must have put up his left leg because his fibula and tibia got snapped. And then his booster seat lap belt severed his small intestine without actually cutting his skin. So he ended up having to have a bowel reduction
wow.
just to repair that. He was unconscious. And so my daughter, Katie, was in the back seat, the 8-year-old. And when the first people at the scene of the accident found her, she was crawling between the front seat crying, "Daddy, don't die."
Oh my God.
Um, but yeah, I was the most injured. I was unconscious. I would spend 18 days in a coma. Ruptured spleen, ruptured diaphragm, which collapsed my left lung, right lung partially collapsed. So again, the fact that I was a marathon runner played a huge role in
Mm.
my survival because my left lung was completely collapsed from my diaphragm rupturing. My right lung was partially collapsed. Um, then my left foot was shattered from the engine block collapsing. The energy traveled up my left leg, separated my pelvis 5 inches in the front, snapped the back of my pelvis, then broke my tailbones in half and fractured L1 through L4. So the four lowest vertebrae all fractured just from the impact. Um, and so, yeah, so I would spend 18 days in a coma. When I came out of the coma, it took me, a time to first understand wasn't my fault. And the police report was out and they determined he crossed the center line. Um, Whether my children, my wife were okay. Um, by the time my son spent 15 days in the hospital, he was the second longest. So I came out of a coma day 18. So by the time I came out of the coma, I had already known that they were home, that they were going to be okay. I kind of started to learn about their injuries and what happened to everybody. But I was in Penn State's medical center, which is in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So right, home of Hershey chocolate, same place. So Penn State University is up in the middle of the state at State College, but their hospital and their teaching hospital is down outside of Harrisburg and Hershey. So that's where I was flown by their helicopters, which are called Lifelines because they're the Penn
Hmm.
State Nittany Lions. And that helicopter saved my life. I mean,
Wow.
I arrived bleeding to death. So I took 38 units of blood in the first 12 hours. So guys like you and I would hold 8 units in our body. So that's how many times I was bleeding out.
And you think about, John, well, first of all, the fact that you were a marathon runner, so you were in unbelievable shape uh, at the onset of this. I think to, all the people out there that are living more sedentary lifestyles, they definitely decrease their life expectancy off the bat. But then, God forbid, something horrific happens. you're alive pretty much before you already, because you already had those healthy habits. And the other real quick thing is just, if you're listening, when you're driving a car, put down the damn cell phone, right? All that stuff can wait. You hear so many stories of people distracted driving, and um the disasters that can happen because of it. So if you're listening, like, that's first and foremost, put down the phone. And then the other thing is, make sure that you're doing those things just to set yourself up for
And your
success.
seatbelt. I mean,
Oh,
again,
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I drive people crazy when they get in the car with me, clients, other kids. I'm like, I'm not pulling out of this parking spot till you put your seatbelt on. And they're like, Nobody can argue with me."
Right,
I'm like,
right.
It saved my damn life.
Yep.
If I
Absolutely.
didn't, so I'm like,
And your family too.
yeah,
Everyone in that car.
everybody had their seatbelt on.
Yep. Yep.
And so, I look at that and I just constantly, that's sort of the one thing that I can say, look, my seatbelt saved my life. Uh, the fact that I was in the condition I was. So when I got into the hospital, they cut me from sternum to pelvis and opened me up because I had all this internal bleeding. They weren't even concerned about the orthopedic stuff. And I was probably 9% body fat. So that was the other thing the doctors would say later, is like, you had no visceral fat that you might, we would have had to work around when somebody
Mm.
comes in. Like, that's a whole nother battle for them when you have all this body fat, particularly around your abdomen. And so they're in there trying to, stop internal bleeding, remove my spleen, and the fact again that I was in that kind of shape really played another crucial part of their ability to perform surgeries on me.
So, with that being said, so you were in a coma for 18 days. You wake up from the coma. Do you remember what was the first thing that went through your mind, or and then what was your mindset like initially? What was it? What was it like? How am I going to ever survive? What am I going to do next? What did that look like?
So first of all, mean, I was on a ventilator, having trouble breathing. So they started to induce the coma somewhere around day 10 because I was starting to come out. They thought I was going to might potentially come out of coma, but I couldn't breathe on my own.
Mm.
So now they're putting all the drugs in me to keep me in an induced coma. So all that is floating through my body. So I was a 180-pound marathon runner. I was 250 pounds 18 days later. That was all the fluid inside my body.
Wow.
Yeah, because my bed would had a scale on it that would weigh me. Like, my doctor's records are like, my records like 250 pounds of fluid, right? So for the first 5 days, like the first part of my book, all those stories about what room I was in outer space,
Mm.
was Tiger Woods talking to me, like those were all hallucinatory things happening from all this medication in my system. So it took me 2 days to figure out I was paralyzed from the waist down. But first of all, I was hooked up to so much stuff that I
Right.
really couldn't move very much at all. Because my back was shattered, I wasn't able to be lifted more than 15 degrees, and I would spend the next 8 more weeks with that same restriction of having to lie flat on my bed. And so it was a process to even start to understand. Like, again, my first question was my family okay?
Mm.
You know, my second question was it my fault? And then kind of from there, realizing that I was paralyzed, what did that mean? Starting to understand my injuries. Because again, I was sutured from sternum to pelvis, and I was so swollen, that after 3 or 4 days of leaving, I guess 3 days it left me open to keep going in to work on internal bleeding. They decided that it was too high of a risk for infection, so they had to shut me. But I was so swollen, they couldn't pull my abdominal muscle shut. So all they did is pulled the fascia layer, like the top layer of my skin across, and sutured me up with big blue sutures, like, like your grandfather's open heart surgery.
Mm.
Like, the, you know, today for most surgeries, they'd use tape and it'd be a scar, but it'd be a big thin scar. Mine has the suture marks because they just stitched me shut and said, if this guy survives, we're going to have to go back in and reattach his abdominal muscles at some point, right? So I kind of woke up, and slowly, as they would, again, having to lay flat in my bed, as they would, I wasn't, all I had was towel or blankets on me, no hospital gown, because I was so many areas that had to work on me all the time, and so many areas sutured up that, I was just starting to learn what was wrong with my body. I could see the big sutures down my chest, but I didn't know. The other big thing they didn't know is they didn't know if I had any head trauma
Mm.
or if I had brain damage from my heart, my lungs not working. Like, they didn't know until I came out of my coma at day 18 whether I was going to process or know anything. So my family kind of, and my friends all were just like, we don't know. Um,
And I could just imagine. I mean, I know being an athlete when something goes wrong, you get hurt. Some of the boys that I work with in schools, especially a couple of the schools that had really successful football teams in the fall, there were some of the boys that got an injury and they went into a bit of a depression because they weren't out there on the field with their brothers. To be an athlete, especially as a marathon runner where you're getting up running 12 miles before you have a cup of coffee in the morning, and now you're like, am I ever going to be able to walk again? Especially when you're looking at your body and you're like, god damn, I look like Frankenstein right now.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
those things, and especially when you think about like how it creeps into your mindset. John, I talk about three thieves with the boys. Like, what are the things that can steal success from them? And the three thieves are resistance, you know, not being willing to do the hard thing, distraction, and victimhood. And for you, the victimhood could have easily come in and washed over you. And I'm one of the things that stands out from your book and in the upside of down is you talk about setbacks being teachers, you know, lighthouses, guideposts for you. So if you're giving a piece of advice to a young man that's listening to this right now, and not saying like, you know, what they're going through isn't as hard for them as it might have been, you know, like to not compare things, but this is absolutely one of the hardest things anybody could ever deal with. But how can someone listening, a young man listening, go from why is this happening to me to what is this here to teach me about?
Hmm. So one of the big ahas that I had later on was the fact that, my focus was get back to the life that I had,
Mm,
right? And so I went from the hospital to moving in right before Christmas, like literally today, uh, um, 18 years ago, into a nursing home as a 36-year-old. Because I was none able to go to the rehab. I had to lay flat for 8 more weeks on my back. They wanted to keep me in the hospital and I couldn't go home. Um, but the whole time I was there, I was like, oh, I'm going to get my life back.
mm,
And at some point in that experience, I realized I'm not going to have that life. That life is gone. But I have an opportunity now to create a life that I want. It's like a reset at 36. Whether you have a reset at 16 or reset, like it's an opportunity. On some level, whatever I chose to do, people were going to support me because of what I've been through. Like the challenges I went through, no one's going to say, oh, you should go back to your old life because nobody believed I could ever get it back. So then it was always like, okay, what matters to me? What are my values? What's important to me? And do those require me like is running marathons important to me? I mean, I ran in college, Division III track and field. It's been part of my life, my entire life. But is it that important to me, or is it the feeling I get from it, right? Everyone talks about a runner's high, right?
mm.
And so for me, it was okay, well, first of all, I need to be there for my kids. They're 8 and 4. So that was a big focus for me, right? My family was a big focus to wanting to not be stuck in a wheelchair because I was in a wheelchair and I needed to get out of it. Um, the second one was I need that fix of putting my body to the test. And now that's what a marathon runners, everybody who does marathons, everybody who does triathlons, you know, they fall in love with this concept of having to like push their limits, right? All athletes. You talk about high school athletes, Division III athletes, particularly the commitment that they put into their sport. They got to love it, right?
Mm.
Or they're not going, especially if they go to college and do it, and especially if they're doing a division. Anybody who's a professional loves practice. Like you're not going to find a professional athlete who hates practice. And so for me, it was like, okay, what I need is to push myself. And that's ultimately how I ended up in men's fitness and all these things, because I just started going from 100 and now 160-pound guy um, who said, okay, at the gym, I can create pain I can control versus pain I couldn't control. And so that's another big thing for me is like, replace something that's out of your control with something similar that you can control.
I I love that. I'm gonna revisit that.
Mhm.
But first I want to just jump back into the story. So you're in a nursing home right now. Mentioned wheelchair. You're down to 160 pounds. And in the intro, I talked about these 45 surgeries that you went through. So give us a little bit of an idea around what did it look like from that point to where you are now? Like what were the surgeries looking like? When did you realize you were going to be able to walk again? And then when you were like, all right, I'm gonna get back into competing as well.
Yeah. So when I moved into the nursing home, like I said, it was right before Christmas. And so at that time, I had to lay flat. I couldn't be raised more than 15 degrees because
Mm,
of my back shattering and my pelvis. So the reason I couldn't even go straight to physical therapy is because my pelvis was bolted together with titanium screws and plates. My back was bolted together. My left foot was bolted together. And so um, when I got to the nursing home, I couldn't move my left leg at all. Like no feeling in it, no ability for me to tell my brain, bend your knee.
mm,
In my right leg, as the swelling was going down on my spine, I was able to wiggle my toes and ultimately be able to start to bend my right leg. So when I entered um, literal inpatient rehab 8 weeks later, I would have some physical therapy while I was in nursing home. They'd come and use what's a plastic slide board and with socks, and they would manually move my left leg. It wasn't like my knee was shattered or my legs were broken other than my foot. I just had all this nerve damage that didn't allow me to control it. Um, so when I went to rehab, I could use my right leg. They had fitted me for this tortoiseshell plastic brace that when I wore that, I could be raised upright. And so I entered rehab with this plastic shell, like a stormtrooper,
mm.
Star Wars, two
Yeah, yeah,
piece
yeah.
thing, and this restriction of not being able to put still more than 20% of my body weight on my left leg because of all that energy and all that damage was up my left leg. I had no feeling at all in my left leg. In rehab, I would learn that I can feel my big toe. And because I can feel my big toe on my left foot, I can walk today.
Mm,
It you always hear these stories about, frostbite or diabetics and they're having to lose toes. Deion Sanders had some toes. I can tell you they're trying to keep his big toe because that is your balance and that will allow you to be able to walk. And so again, huge blessing. You know, I can feel my big toe. To this day, I can't feel my left leg. You squeeze it, I can feel, but it's like it's asleep. So
mm,
it's that pins and needles sleep feeling all the time. So if somebody were to touch my left thigh, I wouldn't feel it. If you took ice or heat and put it on it, I wouldn't feel
mm.
it. Um, and so, you know, the surgeries in the beginning, the first, I don't know. So again, remember my abdominal muscles weren't
Yep.
fastened. So I had like 16 surgeries just before I got out of the hospital, right? Putting me back together. Then I go finally, they let me go in to have my abdominal muscles reattached because I needed to be able to stand, at least with a walker, and for them to do it. So I go in to get ready for this. They realize because I spent all those weeks, I mean, a total of 11 weeks laying flat on my back, and I had no abdominal muscles, the scar healed and connected to my bowel.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
So and they were hoping as I was going through rehab and standing up, they would pull apart on its own, and it didn't. So they just kept putting off the abdominal surgery, hoping that would happen. So crazy story, which is in the book. I go in finally to have my abdominal surgery scheduled. I have a, a, a general trauma surgeon who's going to have to separate my bowel from my skin without nicking my bowel because it would contaminate the area. And then a plastic surgeon who was going to recreate and reconnect my abdominal muscles. Now they realized they had reticulated so far back because it had been now like 9 months since the accident that they knew they weren't going to pull them the whole way across and I'd have to get some Gore-Tex, like a hernia, a piece of Gore-Tex sewn in there. And so I go for pre-op with the anesthesiologist, and the nurse comes in with the stethoscope, listens to my heart, and says, "You have a heart murmur."
Of
And I'm
course.
like,
Why not? Throw
"I-
something else in there,
yeah,
right?
I don't have a heart murmur. Long story short, surgery gets postponed. I end up at Penn State's cardiology. And at the time, I'm the only person in the United States they know of with a traumatic VSD, a hole between the right and left ventricle, like a child is born with, but mine caused by trauma. And
Wow.
the argument would have been, you should have died from about a half a dozen other
Mm,
things for you to live long enough for your heart tissue to die out and then open a hole just doesn't exist because you shouldn't be here. So they didn't have any experience with it. They had no idea what would happen when they go in to do the surgery. And so they postpone again. And so ultimately, when I do have it put together, they can't attach most of my abdominal muscles. They have to put a bunch of slits in them to stretch them far enough. I'm Gore-Tex at the top of the abdominal muscles. And I have a cardiologist sitting in there in case my heart opens up. So I've got a whole team. It's an 8-hour surgery. I spent 15 more days in the hospital. Um, and that's the end of the like putting you back again. That surgery wasn't from the accident. It's part of the recovery from the accident. My abdominal muscles weren't damaged in the accident. They were damaged, cutting me open to
right.
deal with the other stuff, right? So that's the start of the new cycle, which is the next surgeries, everything from trying to keep my left leg. So I have all these stents through my femoral veins to try to keep the scar tissue from shutting down to, removing blood filters and all this other stuff. These are all surgeries that I only had because I didn't die. Like these are okay, you
Right.
lived. Now you're going to have complications and we're going to have to keep fixing stuff. Um, and so it's a lot of, we don't have, a lot of doctors are like, I don't have a lot of experience with this. We know what's wrong with you, we know how to fix it. But, people have all the vein injuries I have. There's two groups of people. There's diabetics and then there's soldiers who get blown up.
Mm. So for a doctor to be like, "Oh, I've never seen anything like this before," you're like, "Oh, great, thanks, doc."
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
feeling really
A,
confident.
yeah, I became the focus of so many conventions for cardiologists or vein specialists.
Yeah,
And like I had to chase doctors.
and meanwhile, while they're, opening you up, they're like, "Oh, by the way, you have this problem and that problem." That must be
Yeah.
really comforting as well. As a quick pause here, just makes me think about how many times, people are sedentary, sitting on the couch watching Netflix, playing video games. And the only time you really, really appreciate how lucky we are to be able to stand up and walk and is when those things are taken away from us, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm sure there were a ton of times during this experience where you're like, I took for granted how I was able to get up off the couch and walk in and pour myself a cup of coffee or whatever the thing was. And it makes me think also of like the years of recovery and uncertainty that you endured. How during that time do you stay self disciplined and hopeful when the progress that you were making felt slow and even invisible or non existent?
Yeah. So two things. First, the part that you said about, having it taken away from you, I write a little bit about that in the book because I was a pretty independent guy. I ran a business with employees. Um, but there's a big difference between asking somebody to do something, like telling your kid to take the trash out, and knowing if they don't take the trash out, you're just going to get up and go take the trash out, right? Or asking somebody to take care of a document or get something done for you, and if they don't do it, you can do it. It's a really different experience, particularly for a man to be there. And I mean, I was as helpless as a baby. I couldn't brush my own
Mm.
teeth. I couldn't feed myself. I always joke sponge baths are overrated. Uh, Not as good as it sounds. But yeah, there's a very when like it's literally taken away, like to the basics that you don't. I mean, again, I think the only thing maybe is comparable is being incarcerated to that level. You know what I mean? Like to be in a point where your freedom's taken from you. In my
Mm.
case, it was I couldn't take care of myself on any level. But to have literal independence removed from you is really easy to
Mm.
take it to think about and say, my God, that's the worst thing. You know,
And
dying didn't happen. The next thing was the worst thing of being like having everything stripped, and having no freedom. To, I wasn't even making my own medical decisions at that point, nor should I have been. So, but to answer your question about how you find the motivation to deal in the downtimes, first of all, over my 18-year journey, it's happened a bunch of times. Like I always tell everybody, if you looked at my 18-year journey and from a mile high perspective, it looks like it's a vertical climb. like of success, right? But if you zoom in on any
Mm,
one year, it's very jagged. And some years it ended down compared
mm,
to where it started. Um, and that's the part that I think is easy when people say, "Oh, I want that guy's had it great. That guy's everything's gone perfect for them." I mean, I'm a perfect example of being judged to the positive for the wrong reasons. Like I'm 205 pounds. I'm under 10% body fat. I just squatted 605 pounds the other day, 6 times. Like I'm strong for a guy, for a 54-year-old guy. And people see me with my clothes on and think that guy's in shape. But as soon as they hear my story, they're like, oh my God, like I wouldn't want to be you. Like I wouldn't want to have gone through what you've gone through. And so, people are judged on their skin color, on their ethnicity, where they're born.
mm.
There's all kinds of ways that we judge people, right? Um, and generally you think about the negative ways, but you also hear people say, "Oh, well, that guy's had it easy. That guy
Mm.
just everything came easy to him. He's successful." When you talk to those people, most of them have similar stories to me.
Yeah,
They have a lot of setbacks,
absolutely. And
and
and I'll tell you what, like squatting 605, like you're strong for 53 years old. You're strong for a middle linebacker on an NFL team. Like
yeah,
that's unheard of to be able to do that. So I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure, like that is an unbelievable accomplishment to be able to go through what you went through and still be able to put weight up like you're putting up.
yeah. And again, that was a journey.
Yeah.
And so, I say like the biggest lessons that I've learned is one, um, we need to make sure every day that we are taking a first step. But I always say I would rather be intentional than perfect.
Mm,
That, and when you don't have your best, you just got to give yourself enough grace. Like if you're a hard driving person, I think you and I are both those type of people, and when you don't execute at the level that you create for yourself, it almost feels as bad as not doing it, right? And so, I had to learn that, particularly with the setbacks that kept coming over and over again, the hole in the heart, like, the fact that I was up to 80% of losing my left leg through this journey, like these setbacks, I've got a surgery and this, you can't lift more than 10 pounds for the next 8 weeks.
wow.
And I'm like, I'm going to go so far back and then I have to start over the workout. Sometimes I just couldn't do it. And, I would be hard on myself until I started to actually work more and more on the book. And I started to realize that, you know what? Sometimes you just have to give yourself the grace to say, you know what? It's not in me right now. But, there's a difference between not doing and quitting. Like that's a big thing too. Like we're going to have setbacks, as long as you don't quit. If you don't say, I quit, which I never say
Mm,
ever in anything, I will say, I need to try to let this go and I'll come back to it when I'm ready. Because that's the other part. Like you just can't be at 100% all the
mm.
time. You just
Yeah,
can't be.
I love that. And one of the things I'll tell the young men that I work with as well, when there's something that's in their path, that obstacle, even if they can't do it, I just have them add in the word yet. It's like the Carol Dweck mindset thing. I can't do this yet, right?
Mhm.
And that just changes it a little bit. The other thing you mentioned is the literal hole in your heart that you had, and you were only able to do X, Y, and Z for a period of time. I think about like my journey over the last year plus since Anthony died. The hole that I had was more of a figurative hole,
Mhm.
and while most of your struggles, and I know there were mental and emotional struggles that you were going through at the same time, but the struggles were very physical in nature. People that are listening, they might have the mental, the emotional, the spiritual struggles that they're going through. And just to recognize, like, while people are going through those things, like, as long as you don't quit, as long as you, whatever the thing is, you still get up tomorrow. Like you're still there. You're still showing up, and showing up is, I mean, to me, it's like 90% of the battle. I want to touch on something that you said in that last response, John, is you talked about, you not being able to brush your teeth and feed yourself. Like it's in those moments when you really start to recognize that we need to rely on other people for us to find success and to especially get back to where we were. So it makes me think about the word vulnerability, and I'm wondering, what role did vulnerability play in your healing, And then also, why do you think so many young men, especially, struggle to ask for help when they need it the most?
Well, so yeah, so again, I always say that both patience and vulnerability were shoved down my throat,
Mm,
right? Because when you're paralyzed in a bed, I mean, I I had so many nurses, nurse aides, doctors. Like I didn't have clothing on ever. Like even when I could get up out of a bed, I still had a nurse aide who had to bathe me in a bathtub. Like I'm 36 years old, talk about humility.
yeah.
Um, and then, you know, the sheer fact that I had zero control. Um, I mean, the first decision that I really played in medically was the decision whether they were going to go in and try to separate my skin from my bowel that had grown in here because the longer we waited for it to separate, the more likely they weren't going to be able to fasten my abdominal muscles. And if they had to do all Gore-Tex or whole entire abdominal muscles, I could never lift more than 5 pounds the rest of my life. Like, so I took the risky
Mm,
decision. Like that was the first role I played in anything that I made a decision about my health or about my surgery, right? Um, but then to kind of ask why men or boys struggle to ask for help. Um, so you and I have talked before off air, and you know, I wasn't until a few years ago that I even began to work through the mental
mm,
parts of what I've been through. And some of that was the way I was raised. Some of that was definitely this male
mm,
ego.
yep.
But part of it was the fact that the surgeries just kept coming, and I all my focus was on my physical rebuilding, right? Um, but I recognized really early on the value of a team, of having a team of people. And one of the first things that I really did in the first couple of years, particularly as I started my rehab, then I quit rehab and started working out on my own with actually, great part of my story is when I quit rehab on my own because I felt like they weren't pushing me hard enough. I went to my local YMCA and started working out with young teens with Down syndrome
Mm,
and worked out with this kid, Danny, for a year. Danny was like 17 years old, had Down syndrome, most positive. I mean, if you've worked at all with people with Down syndrome, they are literally the most positive human beings on the face of the earth.
absolutely.
And I always, say all the time, like they got the right number of chromosomes, we got the wrong ones
Mm,
because they don't have near as much stress and problems as we have, right? But, I learned that I needed a team of people. And so I used to call it my board of directors. And
mm,
there was a spiritual advisor. It was, a very good friend. It was somebody in my industry who was the CEO of a real estate company, and then two doctors. And here's what's critical about that: you need to tell them that that's who they are, and will do they want that role? Um, and in my case, everybody said yes, but I had doctors that were like, here's my cell number. I'm not get back to you immediately, but if you send me a text,
yep.
I understand that you're asking for my advice on something, or I send something to a priest, and I'm like, I would, and so they knew. So when you tell them they're your support team, they're your board, and they say yes, they're going to respond to you. Maybe it's 24 hours, but you know, you've already set the groundwork with them. Like I've asked you, Dennis, will you be an advisor for me when I'm struggling with, some of my speaking stuff and how to reach young men better? And you'd be like, John, I'd be honored.
Mm,
So if I send you a text message 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, you've already created that sense of like, John's counting on me. I already said yes. I know I got 100 things on, but I'm going to have to respond to him and say, hey, I'm kind of busy, but let's jump on a call later. You know what I mean? So I built that support team early on, not really realizing what it was, other than I had so much going on that I needed like a doctor that I could call and they were like, hey, this is what's going on. Oh, okay. Well, that's related to your cardiologist, but I can get you some answers on that because, you asked me to.
mm,
And so I think that's super critical to starting to build up this idea of being able to ask for help because it feels different if you say I built a a board of advisors, right? Now you feel like you would argue that every startup company CEO had a group of advisors, right? People that they trusted to call who would felt at least obligated or not interested in wanting to help them grow, right? So that seems manly, right? That seems like I'm building a business.
Yeah.
And when you take that mentality and create those relationships with other, I mean, in my case, they were all men. I don't know that it had to be. It just turned out that they were. Um, and I think when you look at it from that perspective and start like, this is what I need help with. If it's a young man trying to be an athlete, right? It'd be great to have a trainer or somebody who would play division one, two, or three sports and said, I'm really interested in this program that you're in. I'm interested in your high school. I'm interested in your football team, your basketball team, whatever. That's a great advisor. Somebody who is a college professor or a teacher who says, I'm really interested in you succeeding and I'm struggling, and maybe they're a math teacher and you're struggling in English. There's still going to be a great sounding board to help you through those things. That sounds a lot better, and I think to most men, than this idea that, I'm really struggling right now. I need to find somebody to go in at school and talk to. Um, but I don't know if I told you this, but I spoke at a big high school, few months ago to like 700 kids. And I think I did tell you, because I told you that's the hardest, like you do it every day almost. I talk to 700 kids. My jokes don't go over,
Right.
there's a few teachers, they're laughing or they're understanding, but I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't know if this is resonating with these kids at all. And so it's a 1 hour, I'm done. And when I'm done, all of a sudden there's 30 kids in a line just waiting to come up and talk to me, telling me things like they're struggling. They just got the Division I offer to go play football, but they're really struggling with choosing and how far they have to go. To a young lady who now has a startup, but 2 years ago was contemplating suicide.
Mm.
I mean, these are kids opening up, and the only reason I can think is I spent an hour telling them all the problems I've had and all the struggles I've gone through, and I think just they were like, all right, I can talk to this guy because I can't say anything that isn't going to be as
Yep.
equally challenging as him. And so, they're like, I mean, I would assume to you, when you can sit in a room full of young men and have a conversation and then they stay and they want to talk to you, you've hit the nail on the head there.
I totally agree with that. And it's one of the things that I recognize right away when I'm doing a building men program, is therapeutically, they'll tell if you're in a program for, you're going to be a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, a social worker. One thing that they tell you is, especially when you're dealing one on one, is you're asking questions, you're offering support, but you're not divulging any personal information. You're not saying, well, this is what I went through when I was your age. I do the exact opposite of that. And I don't know if that's the reason why it's so successful when I'm working with a group, is right off the bat when I walk in, and in many of the schools where I work and the organizations where I work, I look very different than the students that are there and the faculty that's there. Many schools, I'm the only Caucasian person that's in the space. Right. And so initially when I walk in, they look at me and there's like a little like, all right, who's this big white dude? Like, are you kidding me here? And I try to, I got like a, building man quarter zip. I got like Jordans on that have like a little pink splash to them or whatever. And I could see that they're looking at me in a specific way. But one thing that immediately helps me gain their trust and confidence is after the first meeting, they come out knowing a lot about me, and I'm so vulnerable with them, and basically I'm giving them the permission to share a little bit more about themselves. It's not an overnight thing where the boys start talking about things that they're going through, but by the time I get to around this time of the year, I have boys telling me about situations that they would never tell anyone else about. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's recognizing, and I tell them all the time, there is so much strength in vulnerability. It's something that I know my father was never able to do, is any level of vulnerability, and I'm sure yours as well. We come from the generation where anything that you were going through, you just shoved it down and shoved it down, and a lot of times it was like shaking up a soda can, and when you open it up, it's going to explode. And a lot of times with boys, it explodes in a very aggressive, violent way. So I think that there's something to be said about being able to share those things in a way where you're able to trust the people in that space, or going to hold that for you, and be there and to help lift you up and support you. So I'm going to take one of the things that you said before, John, is you mentioned you were enduring pain, like the pain that you were going, you're like, this is something that I can control to use for the future. One of the healthy habits that we talk about in building men is the importance of intentional discomfort. So when you emphasize the power of daily choices, talk about one small habit or decision that helped you regain that self of control when you felt everything was completely out of your hands.
Yeah. So, talk about how to build daily habits. And I talk a lot about that in my coaching. For me, one of the big tricks I figured out early on is remove as many obstacles in front of
Mm,
you as possible. So for almost a year, when I started working at the YMCA with the special needs kids, I slept in my workout clothes. I slept in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and I've had a pair of Crocs sitting by my bed because I couldn't tie shoes and reach down. And so I'd slide my feet into Crocs, and if it was winter, I grabbed a hoodie that was sitting on the end of my bed, and I it just kept me from over analyzing, trying to figure out what I was going to put on. And I didn't care what I looked like to walk into the gym, but I slept in my gym clothes. Um, you know, Ironically, like when I wanted to work harder on the book or speaking, um, in my office, I had a television. I took the remote control and I stuck it upstairs. I have to climb the stairs
mm,
back then, which was a big deal to get the remote control. So there's something to be said in looking at what are your obstacles that might, cause you to think and analyze too much before, you know, every single time that I ever got into the car, I went to the gym. My intention was to get in the car, drive to the gym. The distance between either my bed or my desk and the car seat was the distance I had to span to be successful to get to the gym.
mm,
So the most number of obstacles I could remove. I always go to the gym early in the morning when I can. Even if that means an hour earlier in the morning than I have to, because it's so easy for me personally after a day of like doing these podcasts, like working, to say I'm not going to do it at 5 o'clock. I'd much rather just go home, right? So I know that about myself. So that's the other thing, sort of getting to. I know at this point where I'm not good. Like I just know that I'm not good there, or that I hate it so much that I won't be good at it, even though I can do it. We were talking earlier about, being able to have the skill sets to work on a house or do
mhm.
construction,
Yep.
repair stuff, that kind of thing. You know, that skill set matters to me because it's valuable to me to use. Um, Working out in the gym hard, I never set out with this goal of being this strong, but we're back to this idea of, well, pain I can control versus
Mm,
pain I can't. If you're a marathon runner, you didn't start that way. You started trying to run a mile, and over time you build up the stamina, and then it wasn't like, oh, I set out one day to do a triathlon. I just ended up there.
mm,
I didn't set out to get stronger, but having a physically strong body, like having a physically strong mind, is a huge advantage in just about every part of your life. Like from simply taking the trash out or being able to move a bunch of stuff out of the back of the car. I mean, from a guy who couldn't lift any weight, it was, had the opposite, you know, that needed somebody to do something for them constantly and really didn't, couldn't get off a chair, to somebody who, you see them carrying a box in. I'm like, oh, I get that. Let me get the door for you. No, I got the door too. Like
mm.
I can hold this,
Yeah.
I can hold your 50-pound box in one arm and open the door. And
It's like
there's,
it's like choosing the path of more resistance.
yeah,
Each time when you're doing it intentionally, it's like it made me laugh because there will not be a time that I go out to the grocery store that it's going to take me more than one trip to bring the bags in. I don't
yeah,
care what I have to do. If
yeah,
it's 30 bags, I'll have them around every part of my body carrying those
yeah,
bags in because I'm like I need to do this all the time, and the importance of strength training as well. Again, it's one of the healthy habits in building men is the importance of strength training, right? Because the more that you can set your body up for the hard things that are going to come, the better you're going to be. And one thing I tell the boys too is I say, you're not going to like to hear this. This is going to be hard for you to hear, but I want you to know that you're going to have a lot of great times in your life, but there's going to be a lot of hard things that you're going to have to deal with. I don't know what they are, and it's likely that you don't know what they are, and you don't know when they're going to come and knock on the door. But the more that you put yourself in a situation where you're doing hard things on purpose, when those things come, and they will, you'll be more ready to handle them. So it makes me think about this. We're both fathers, right? And we both even have, children that are in our life that are not our kids, but they are like our kids, right? Like, between Julie's sons, Luke and Liam, and then also all the boys that I'm working at and building men, like they're my kids. What I think about too is for men, or, parents in general, to be able to model resilience for their kids, but at the same time not pretending like toxic positivity, like, oh, everything is okay. So how do you model resilience, but also recognize, like, this is really hard. This is really difficult what I'm going through.
Yeah. So that's interesting because that's a big thing that I'm working on right now. Like I'm back to writing again,
Hmm.
certainly building out concepts and this idea. So I mean, I was raised in a strong family. So, both my parents, both my parents worked, but I was involved with my grandparents. So I've had nice quality male role models. Maybe we didn't share emotion. We broke in some of that after the car accident. I can
Yeah.
tell you that's, even my best friend has been my best friend my entire life. We're like after the accident, like, why don't we ever say I love you?
Mm.
So now we do.
Yeah.
My dad, I don't hang up the phone. I don't remember, a lot of times in my life ever saying, and my mom all the time, but not my dad. But I don't hang up the phone from my 79-year-old father without saying I love you anymore. Like there's no reason not to. Like, why I do? Why would I not tell you? But this idea of you know replicating hard things, it's it's okay to have. It's in fact it matters to have a goal. So like to say like here's the goal, and it's reinforcing a positive behavior, right? And when you achieve that positive behavior, you should be rewarded. Like one of my 8 pillars is taking wins. Like taking wins matters. So if you say, to a young man, my goal is to get my grades from A's and B's, and right now is I have C's and D's and then maybe an F. That kid turns around and gets his A's and B's. You're basically saying, go do this. And in return, we're going to go do something special. I'm not going to go buy you a PS5. I'm not going to go hook you up with video games, but we're going to go do an actual event. Maybe we'll go see a Phillies game, you and I, down in this area. Maybe we're going to go you want to go fishing? You like to fish? You want to learn to fish? I love to fish. I'm an outdoors guy. Like, let's go do that.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, you can't constantly reinforce a negative behavior because you just want them to feel positive. Like there is a degree all the time of you should be upset with yourself if you do something that's, in school, at home, wherever that isn't appropriate. There should be a little bit of pain with that.
Mm.
Um, and you should want to apologize and try to do better. I mean, I screw up a lot. One of the things I've learned is to say I'm sorry,
Mm. Love
and
that.
to say this is what I did, and I'm going to try to not replicate that again. Doesn't mean I'm not going to, but I'm going to try to not create a negative, repeatable pattern. Um, and I think those are the only things you can really, really do is when you're talking to these kids, tell them it's super positive and that you can't really do anything else other than reset, retry, and give yourself some grace to say and expect that your teacher, your parent, your uncle, whoever was involved, they're going to give you if you ask for it, they should give it to you.
Yeah, I love that. And the pillars, I mean, it definitely resonates with me. Obviously, in Building Men, we have the 12 character pillars, but yours are more phrases or ideals to live by. So you mentioned taking the wins. Highlight one or two of the other pillars that you think are real. I mean, I'm sure they all have a level of importance to you without giving away all the stuff in the book
Yeah,
for
yeah,
free. But what's
yeah.
another pillar or two that you would recommend people take a look at?
So I think the most important of all of them is pillar seven, which is falling in love with the process.
Mm,
Um, we talked a little bit earlier about athletes, right? I use that example a lot about falling in love with the process. I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of Division III athletes. I was a Division III athlete. There are very, very, very few Division III athletes who ever become professional, right? But they have put in, say they're, a baseball player, they're a field hockey player. Those men and women have put in most of, if not from back in, 5-year-old playing little t-ball to seniors in college, playing a sport that they love. But I can tell you, I've never talked to one of them who doesn't love the practice, the camaraderie of their teammates, the locker room. If they did, they're not at a Division III school playing that sport. If they dislike going to practice. Like I would tell both my children, my daughter was a very good competitive soccer player, and my son is a very good um, golfer. Both, in college, and I said, the day you tell me you don't want to go to practice, when we're adding 3, 4, 5 practices a week now as you're getting into high school because your club teams are having
yep.
that kind of, or the tournaments are around the country now because you're playing at this level that requires us to enter our golf tournament in January in Florida. Um, when you don't want to put the work in and you just want to go to the games, we're going to back it down. Maybe you still want to play and just play it at a lesser
Yeah.
level where the commitment's not the same. But if you want to be really good at that thing, then you're going to go to a lot more practices because those teams are going to require more practice. And when you don't want to do it, so that's when we back it down because you're not loving it, then you're not going to be great. That's why I tell people all the time, find something that you love. I talk again, I get to talk to some people coming out of college too, because they're Division III athletes about to enter the workforce. And I'm like, you got to find something that you're as passionate about as you were about playing football
Mm,
at your college, or because that's that's what drove you to one, get yourself into shape to be a top field hockey player. And that drive is already in you. The discipline's already in you. Now you just need to find a new outlet for it, um, that you can now use with that same, and you know, same amount of commitment, but still a love of what you're doing.
yeah,
You
definitely
can
appreciate
find
that.
that. Yeah.
And as a former Division III athlete who did not go pro as a baseball player, I could totally agree with what you're telling me. And the other thing it makes me think about too, John, is I mentioned before the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's definitely been one of the things that's changed the way that I think about not only my role in building men, but also as a parent. It's the idea of the things that we praise. And I think as parents, we often praise the results of the thing. My whole thing has shifted to praise the process, praise the
Mhm.
work that it takes to get to wherever they're going, because they might not always get the best grade, they might not always hit the home run or make the shot to win the game, but they can always work hard. The
Yeah.
results will take care of themselves once you have the hard work, under control. And praising, the process is such a huge part of it. So I really, really appreciate that. So looking back, was there a specific moment that you can pinpoint, or was it more just like holistically when you realized that your story, the story, could serve others? And then how did that shift your sense of identity and purpose?
Yeah. So because the accident happened on December 1st and I moved into the nursing home right around Christmas, our local newspapers, we have two of them, one in Harrisburg and one in Carlisle, where I live, um, kind of wrote like feel good stories at Christmas time about the Ulsh family and surviving the accident because we all survived, right?
Mm,
So the first year, my wife did most of that interview. I wasn't really talking. And then the next year, they kind of did a follow up. And plus, the next year, I decided, I kept saying I was going to run this turkey trot, this 5K race that I had just run, with my daughter and the rest of my family. But she and I ran it together, just a few days before the accident. And so nobody believed that I could do it. but I did it. I did it with a walker. It took me an hour and 6 minutes. I had two of my friends hold me up, had to stop along the way.
Wow.
But the newspapers were like, oh, that's a great story, right? So as more and more people, and then, that kind of kept happening where somebody would like, oh, let's just write a little article. How's your family doing? When I went and started working at the YMCA with the UCP kids with special needs, both between the YMCA and United Cerebral Palsy, they're like, well, this is such a great story, and you're using our facilities and you're recovering. And so they're like, well, we're going to do a story on the YMCA. Well, interview John. He's in the, they'll
Mm.
also interview some older guy and maybe a mom who's getting the benefits of her kids being, members on scholarship. And so those stories would come in magazines locally and newspapers. And that's when it started to be like, well, I have a platform, right? Sometimes it was as much as wear your damn seatbelt,
Mm.
don't use your cell phone, and by the way, make sure your car insurance is stacked if you have more than one car, right? Like those are just the lessons I learned from like basic, right? And then for a really long time, as I was speaking a lot back then around the country, they would be organizations that I just come and tell them my story. And in a room full of adults, particularly ones that are parents, my story just resonates because again, I always say I'm not I'm not a soldier.
Mm.
I'm not a first responder. I'm not even a motocross racer. I wasn't doing anything particularly dangerous to put me or my family in any type of jeopardy. I was driving a car home from a swim meet, right? So, you know, it was me that it happened to, but it could have been you just as likely. Situation with your brother, same kind of thing. Freak accident, freak thing. It could have happened to the rest of the group he was with.
Yep.
It could have happened to just about anybody else leaving the game. And that's just the card that was dealt. So like to hear that story, I'm like, that could have happened to me or anybody else, just like my story. Like I know he wasn't choosing to do anything particularly dangerous. I wasn't doing anything. And so for a lot of people, that story resonates just because they can put themselves in your shoes pretty easily and say, wow, that's crazy. I don't know how I could get through that.
Right.
And my answer to that all the time to anybody who says, how did you spend like 8 weeks laying on your back? Or how do you keep doing this? My answer is always, you'd be surprised what you're capable of
Mm.
once you're forced to have to do it. I
Appreciate
would
that.
have never said I could have, before the accident, that I could put myself through any of this. I would have said, no, I didn't have it in me. But you'd be surprised what is in you when you're forced to have to face it.
You dig down, right? The things that rest beneath the surface in all of us. John, before I ask the last question on the podcast, and I'll put all this information in the show notes, but where can people that are listening to this right now, where can they find you? Where can they buy the book? Just give us a little bit about, background on where we could get some more about what you're doing, what
Yeah.
you've been through.
So johnulsh.com. So johnulsh.com is my website. There's my coaching stuff there, information on the book. There's a lot of some free handout and give outs, but related to the 8 pillars. A lot of relationships back to the content that's there. But then my YouTube channel, we're constantly putting stuff up there. And then, Instagram is at John Ulsh, Facebook's at John Ulsh for the kids. That's Facebook. That's for your parents.
Yeah.
Um,
Or grandparents now, right?
yeah. TikTok, John Ulsh. So they're on the social, but my website has a link to all the
Yep.
social. But we're putting content up once, twice a day right now, just trying to give a little bite size, story of motivation. So we are posting a lot every single day on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn for again. So ultimately, it's surprising the number of teenagers using LinkedIn.
Mm.
Yeah, my kids use more LinkedIn than they do Facebook.
That's great. Or TikTok, like that's something that they can do to connect and learn something in a more professional manner rather than scroll holing with whatever the algorithm is pushing their way on TikTok and Instagram as well.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I get a lot of messages, and I'm pretty good at getting back to them, particularly like after I speak at a high school.
yep.
Because that's the platform they're on. And ultimately I end up following a lot of these students because I'm like, I want to see their high school journey into college because, we've connected on some level that I've got to have a talk with them. So now I want to see the day they do their signing day,
Yep.
or, the day they commit to the college they're going to go to, or the day they, graduate high school.
It is truly humbling when you get a message from a student that's in school, that something that you said to them resonated and it impacted their mindset, even the path that they're on moving forward. Totally agree with that. Last
The other
question,
one, I
John.
just had
Yeah,
the
go
other one,
ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Dennis. Yeah, the other one that's awesome is when you get one from the parent,
Yeah.
because then you literally know they went home and had a conversation. Like I say all the time, like I love these podcasts and I love what I love listening to your podcast. I love what you do. And I feel it's like my obligation to go have a conversation with
Mm,
somebody else, whether at the gym or in my office or something like, oh, I heard this podcast or I had this speaker or like if I just take what I hear and then I just kind of process it myself, I feel like it doesn't resonate at the same level of me going out and like sharing it somewhere else. Like, right. Like I always say, the best way to learn is to teach anyway. Right. So, you know, I take from people all the time, constantly, and reuse it. When I can remember who I got it from, I give credit to it.
yeah.
But like I told you, I'm a huge fan of what you do, and I bet you at least 5 times a week right now. I have a conversation with somebody. As soon as somebody tells me they're having trouble with a kid, as soon as they're telling me that how they feel like society is where it's at, I'm
Mm,
like, you gotta go listen to this guy. Go listen to him.
thank you, man.
we're
No, I
not
truly
we're not
appreciate that.
we're not turning our backs. Everybody's not turning their backs on young men. And I get that they feel like it. Um, and I'm in a lot of high schools right now, and I see it as well. And I'm in some private schools and situations that are extremely fortunate kids to be there, whether they're because their parents can pay or because they're on scholarship, and you still see it.
Yeah, no, I truly appreciate it. I mean, so many things during this podcast I will take and put into play into my own life. I can't even imagine someone who is, on the journey of starting when things are not in a good space for them, all the little nuggets of gold that they can take from this as well. Last question, John, and I will preface this by saying I know that this is not the last time that you and I are going to speak on this podcast or in many different avenues. I definitely appreciate the synergy and the connection that we have here. Grateful for the last hour or so to have the opportunity to talk to you. So last question that I'm going to ask you is, um, ending each episode, we talk about one thing. So the way that I'm thinking about that is this is one thing that a listener to this podcast can do today to start turning their own down into an up or into an upside.
Okay, so the one thing that I think um, every person can benefit from at any age is this concept of paralysis by analysis, right?
Mm,
Um, I think I might have said it earlier because it's one of my key phrases that so resonates. It is so much more important to be intentional than perfect. So much more important. It no, we're not going to be perfect and we're not going to execute something particularly new perfect. But if you sit there and try to say, well, it's not the right time, or I'll wait to January 1 for my New Year's resolution, or I don't have the right skill set right now. Like, just be intentional. I mean, life is literally a bunch of first steps.
mm.
Like for me, it was look that my first step was after the accident was literally a life-changing experience for me. But guess what? The next day I had to make another first step and then another first step. Like it doesn't just like momentum comes from a series of first steps. And so, you know, I think the single thing you can do is just be very intentional and get over this concept of being perfect.
All that mic drop moment. Really appreciate it. To those listening to the podcast, go check out our sponsors, Become Stronger Industries, become-stronger.com. They are the makers of handmade hammers, steel maces, and other badass equipment. Check out Finish the Race Apparel, ftrapparel.com. They're the makers of all things building men. And also check out the charity that we started for Anthony. It is called Stay in the Fight. The website is stayinthefight.am. Who knew that there was a .am as a .com kind of thing for a website? So what we're doing is we are raising funds to support the mental health therapy, counseling, retreat experiences for those who are in need, but they don't have the financial resources or insurance to be able to afford it. So you'll hear a lot more about our charity as well. John Ulsh, thank you so much, brother. Really appreciate the last hour or so when we, during this discussion. Looking forward to future conversations. Those listening to the Building Men podcast, go one step further than you thought you could go. And we'll see you next time on Building Men. Our young men are struggling. We see a lack of positive male role models. And in school, we're dealing with truancy. We're dealing with failing grades, behavioral issues. We're dealing with isolation, aggression. Students post-high school, we're dealing with an alarming suicide rate. We're dealing with poverty. We're dealing with incarceration. As a society, we recognize we have a problem. We've tried everything with limited to no success at all. So what's the answer? It's a foundational mentoring program. It's Building Men.
They really do show you a better way and a better path. Doing the right things when people aren't even looking shows a lot. And it shows who you are as a person.
Building Men means a lot to me because it's somewhere where I can go and open up and talk about things that I don't talk to other people about. It taught me that talking is something, it's natural, it's something you're supposed to do, talking about your feelings.
Also giving me the guidance that not a lot of other kids have gotten, and it's also showed me how to become more of a leader since now I'm representing something, now I'm in a group.
Building Men means to me is the steps in order for a boy to become a man. They have to go through adversity, hardships, challenges, everything in order to become a man.
I love how when I go there, I'm held accountable. If I say I want to start doing something one meeting, I either have to have it done or shown that I'm taking steps by the next meeting. It's a great program. A lot of kids should do more stuff like this because a lot of, especially boys and men don't have nobody they can talk to or they feel they can talk to. So having a closed, safe space feels great.
It impacted my mindset a lot. It helped me focus on my schoolwork more. It helped me communicate more to other people.
He tells us real stories about his life, and that kind of touched me as a person because the same stuff that he's going through, I'm going through. And I was going through a difficult time, and we were both going through a difficult time. So him speaking out about it made me realize it's okay to speak out about my struggles as well.
A place where you could be your authentic self and feel like you won't be judged for it. A place that we've created a culture, an edifying culture for our young boys to level up and mature as young boys in this world.
I got to meet the founder, Dennis, and he just seemed like a down-to-earth, cool person. He seemed like he knew us. He seemed like he knew what we were going through without us telling him what we were going through.
They have become a small community in itself that probably would never have happened if it wasn't for this program. If it wasn't for the Building Men program, I feel like I would not be at the level that I'm at right now in my life. Building Men has definitely changed my life. It has made me a better person, a better friend, a better son, a better counselor, a better mentor.
Overall, it's just been a great experience, and I look forward to it growing to bigger and better things.
That I feel this interconnected with the staff, not only the male staff, but everyone, and the kids. I'm able to feel much more connected than I ever thought I would be as an intern.